Soren,
Hi.
welcome back.
I'm so glad that we got into this because I think it's so interesting how closely the educational system of a culture, country, or community, how closely it mirrors and parallels the cultural model of that community, right?
So I'm glad we're talking about this as well. And you are very well traveled. And what folks might not know about you is you and your family have traveled internationally from a very early age. And you've been to some amazing countries. You're heading in a little bit of time to some more amazing countries. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit too. But you have a perspective of when Soren travels, Soren's traveling through one of the lenses of a 17-year-old high school student. And so what you might be picking up on in the countries that you go to, like when I travel, it's let's talk about the food, let's talk about the culture, let's talk about what people do for fun or for recreation in those countries. That's a lens you're looking through as well. And you can't help but not look at these countries through the lens of a student. So what's some of the takeaways that you've learned as you've traveled this globe?
Broadly looking at education or just overall?
Let's start with the education piece.
So I am looking at exclusively schools abroad right now. I really don't want to go to college in the United States. So I'm looking at like the UK area, Ireland, primarily because they speak English, but it will still be a different cultural experience.
Right.
And it'll get me closer to a lot of the places that I want to visit more often, those being mainland Europe. But like when we were in Portugal most recently, we visited a college there. And it was kind of shocking how similar it was to
really?
United States educational facilities.
Yeah, in what ways?
Just the atmosphere of the college. Like it reminded me really strongly of some of the colleges that we visited in Florida, like University of Florida in Gainesville. I don't know if I said the right. Is it? I think it's University of Florida.
Yeah.
Is paralleled that for me a lot because it's a very in Portugal, we visited the University of Lisbon and it was a really open atmosphere. There were kids everywhere. Obviously it was a gorgeous day out. And even like the architectural style mirrored it really closely for me.
Yeah. Did you have the opportunity to interact with any of the students there as part of your tour?
We didn't go on proper tour. We were just walking around the campus.
Yourself.
Yeah. I think I get like more anxious around kids that are closer to my age.
Yeah.
So I was having like a little panic moment.
You were feeling it.
Yeah. Because I think part of it is like, I think it's my fear of change wrapped up in like just being thrown into a new environment.
Yeah.
But I had to take a second when I got there to just like calm down and acclimate.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I just get very flustered.
Well, and that you don't get much more real than being in person at the University of Lisbon, thousands of miles away from life and everything you know. It's a year away. Like, that's real. That's coming. And I know in talking with your parents about preparing you for this coming trip to the UK and to places you've toured and been to before, it's making it really real for them too.
Yeah, it's like, it's scary, but also really exciting. Like, I have lived my entire life quite sheltered, like in small town Maine.
Yeah.
And even though I've been exposed culturally and like in reality, a lot more than the vast majority of people that come from my area, which is a result of my privilege, of course. I still, like, when I'm visiting these countries, it's through the lens of privilege, right?
Yeah.
We stay at nice hotels. I feel like to some extent, we try to get the real experience when we go to places. And like actually China, I feel like we got a fairly real experience
Yeah.
simply because they don't have that large of a tourism industry.
Yeah.
So you can like stay isolated in a bubble. This was
Yeah.
like, we were just in Beijing.
Yeah, I think that's something that your parents are really intentional about, though.
Yeah.
Is that when you all travel as a family, it's about traveling as a family and experiencing things together. And you're not necessarily looking for 5-star dining. You want to eat where the people of that country eat, and you want to be in the places and that those folks travel to. And you love the architecture and the history and the culture of the places you're visiting. I think other family members, your brother appreciates that, but is also maybe looking for some other things. Like, I know it was really important for both your dad and your brother to find a swimming pool so they could keep that exercise and keep that sport stuff going. And that was an opportunity for you and your mom to go sightsee.
Yeah. I love museums.
Yeah.
And I love walking the streets and just examining the buildings. When I'm in a foreign country, I love people watching.
Yeah.
Because examining the mannerisms of other cultures is so interesting, and like it serves to denormalize the like American cultural model, which I've grown up in, as like the standard basic, right? Yeah. Like experiencing these other things sort of takes me off of the pedestal that comes as a result of immersion in American culture. Yeah. And allows me to sort of value other cultures to the same extent. Like I see it a lot with other people that live in our country.
From other, like, who are staying here or students here from other countries?
No. Like American citizens.
Got it.
Yeah. That we value our culture over the cultures of others.
Of course we do.
When it's arbitrary, right? Yeah. There's nothing that makes us distinctly good. I think that we have a lot of assets that are super important and valuable. And we place emphasis on some really important things. Yeah. But also, like, looking down on other cultures simply because they aren't close to ours seems so foolish. And it's like, it's arbitrary judgment, right?
It is. It's bias.
Yeah.
You know, as both a social worker and as a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging consultant in some of my professional worlds, that American-centric, self-centered view of our country and our ways and our world is all about bias.
I totally agree. And like, that's such a strong tendency of humans. Like, we have evolved for tribalism, which is what makes us so, I think, vulnerable to like nationalism and mob mentality, right? Which tribalism is really important because it allows for us to foster a community and create an identity for ourselves.
Belonging.
But also, you last podcast were like harped on balance so much. Yeah. And it is a balance. On it. Yeah. Well, I don't mean to make you seem like
not at all.
Yeah. But balance is really important. Like any pride needs to be taken in small doses. Right. I think I try to, at least every time I have an experience, attempt to step back from myself, step back from the person that I've just interacted with, and attempt to like analyze and dissect.
Appreciate.
Appreciate. What's just happened.
Yeah, I think that for me is balance, and you have this unique ability to do that. I respect that in you. For me, the balance is you can hold multiple things at the same time. You can have pride in your town, your community, your state, your country, and appreciate somebody else's culture and somebody else's experience. They're not mutually exclusive. One doesn't take away from the other. Balance for me is the ability to hold two things at the same time that on the surface might appear contradictory.
Well, I totally agree. Like the nature of humanity is contradiction, right?
Right.
Like every human is a ball of conflicting emotions, thoughts, ideologies, experiences. And to be human is to bring all of these things together into a unified individual, right? Like Hegel, actually, a German philosopher from the 19th century, was really engaged with this idea of conflict and contradiction and hypocrisy in humanity. But I think hypocrisy puts a very negative connotations
I was just gonna say
around just existing and ebbing and flowing. Like, I think me as an individual, I've moved away from this a lot, but like I used to create an idea of myself and then need to adhere to that.
Yeah.
Right? When I feel like I can adhere to whatever I want to. I don't even have to adhere to anything. I'm just an individual and I choose based on what I feel is best in the moment rather than what I feel most closely coincides with an idea that I have.
Right. Something you're interested in or passionate about. Yeah. Which kind of brings me back to this this conversation about traveling and experiencing other cultures and other countries and the appreciation that you bring to the difference. And as you mentioned about the university in Portugal, the similarities. And being able to kind of be in awe of, wow, there's a lot like what I'm used to back home.
I totally agree. Like, we oftentimes, when like looking at other cultures or communities, emphasize the differences, but I think it's so important to remember every human is ultimately driven by pretty similar things.
Right.
We all want to be accepted. We all want to be loved. We all want to be like happy and healthy. We all want the people that we love to succeed. Right. So like empathy is really important in attempting to reinforce that idea. Like, even in China, which we see as like something so foreign, I found myself really enjoying a lot of the locals there. Like people would come up and take pictures with me and my brother because we were white and a lot of the tourists in Beijing had never seen white people.
Oh, interesting.
But like every interaction I had there was just really pleasant and enjoyable. And we vilify entire countries and their citizens just because they have an authoritarian government.
That's different from ours.
That's different from ours. And it's important to, like, we cannot attach people as individuals to the organizations which they live under or live within.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, guilty by association isn't always the best way to look at the world.
Yeah. And it can create a really, like, jaded perspective. Like, my mother, which I understand, like out of rage and feeling protective of me, has a tendency to like vilify individuals with ideas different from hers. And obviously a lot of these ideas are hateful and really unpleasant, but they're motivated by ignorance. And like, I actually really enjoy engaging with people that I don't necessarily agree with. And I have not been exposed to. Like, I recently got really interested in theology, and I've been going to the like Bible study club before school at our school. And I love the kids that run it. And it's really fun and really interesting. And the kids that run it have gotten hate for like their endorsement of Christianity because they are devout Christian. These people are really good people and I love being around them.
Right.
And they're motivated by like kindness, compassion, and empathy.
Yeah, well, again, guilty by association.
Yeah, exactly.
Is a unfortunate lens to view the world. Today's episode has been brought to you by the Inspired Ally Certificate Program for educators looking to better partner with LGBTQ+ youth and their families.
Norm. Like, people who are in an advantaged position don't realize that their really experiencing things in a different or perhaps better
Yeah.
way than those who aren't privileged, because that's just what they've lived their life like.
Yeah.
Like, I have lived in a very well-off, not very well-off, I would say fairly well-off family in a super sheltered world in a rural, very wealthy country, right? So although I try to have empathy, I don't have the experience base to really actually engage with a lot of people and empathize with their experience truly, because I think you need some shared amount of experience in order to engage with empathy. And all I can have is sympathy and try to cultivate an understanding for that.
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna challenge you a little bit, because I don't think you have to have, world according to Chris, I don't think you have to have experience with that person's what they are going through for you to have empathy. I think you, knowing you like I do, you can appreciate the perspective and anticipate and learn from that person what they might be experiencing or what they may have felt when they were going through that tough time without having necessarily having gone through that time. Like, if you had a friend, I don't even know if this is true or not, but you might have a friend who their house burns down and they've lost everything.
Yeah.
That's never happened to you, but you could appreciate what that might feel like to lose everything. It won't be exact, but you have the ability to access what that might feel like, to be able to offer support, love, friendship, compassion, and empathy.
Well, sorry, let me rephrase what I said, because I totally agree with you. Empathy is an emotional experience, and emotions are universal.
Yes.
Thus making empathy universal by the transitive property. Sorry. More what I was attempting to say, which I don't know if you would agree with. I think that it's difficult. Like, it's hard to talk with somebody as though you're like equals without making them feel unlistened to when you're coming from a place of privilege. Like, I was more saying, when you're engaging with people who have had different life experiences from you, it's important to listen rather than talk over, saying,
right.
I've had such a similar experience to you, right?
Right.
Like,
because you don't want to like, it's not about this comparison of, my house is burned down too, let me tell you about it, while you're in this place of pain and vulnerability.
Well, I think that, like, I see this a lot with younger high school kids, and I did this too. Like, there's a lot of like almost trauma competition.
100%.
Right? Like, kids, when they're in a bad position, want to be in like the worst position.
Yeah.
And I did this a lot. Like, I'd see my friends doing horribly and doing like really awful things, and I'd be like,
oh yeah,
I can do much better than that.
Yeah.
Like, and that was a big thing with like self-harm, especially in like online communities that I was a part of. It was so competitive.
Yeah.
Which, like, I think parents and a lot of people who haven't been engaged in that a lot can't even fathom.
Yeah.
Because you're like competing to destroy yourself.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this before, several occasions, that I think this is an element of youth culture. And unfortunately, you've shared with me that from your perspective, this is also an element of queer youth culture. That it's things that we've already referenced in our time together here in the studio. This whole concept of, I don't see myself as worthy. I don't see myself as deserving of a future. And so I'm going to treat my body like shit in every sense of the word, inside and out, because I don't even see myself being here 10 years from now. We talked about that last time a little bit.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if I mentioned like the homework example last time. I think I did.
I think you did, yeah.
where it's like just a reckless abandon
Yeah.
for one's own safety or health, because like, why would I protect something like I'm not going to be able to cash in the future?
That's right.
Yeah. And it's like, it's nihilism. Like kids nowadays, and I see this a lot from engaging in like modern media produced by a lot of people in my generation. Like, we're not going to be able to buy a house.
Yeah.
So why even
Why
try to
bother?
get on a stable financial footing?
Yeah. You know what I think is so fascinating about that too, Soren, is that, you're talking about this from a high school student perspective. As somebody who's, again, looking down the gun at 50 years old, I think about retirement, like the other side of the age continuum. And many of the queer adults that I've worked with or know from a more personal dynamic, we talk about this a lot, that even as an adult, when a queer person doesn't see themselves as worthy or deserving of a future, the idea of a retirement account, the idea of a bank account, the idea of purchasing property or investing in something doesn't even factor in, because I'm not going to be around to cash in on it, literally or metaphorically. So why bother?
Yeah, I think that like, obviously it's not good to be a Scrooge and like hoard things for a future date that's never going to come. And it's really important to live your life with some reckless abandon.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm kind of a pro at living my life with reckless abandon.
Yeah, you've got that down. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm working on it, but yeah. Obviously, it's important to have fun now, but also it's important to have fun in the future.
Balance.
Maintain that.
But it comes back to this, for me, this idea that self-worth, the ability to project forward, the ability to see one as worthy enough, as deserving of that future. So my motivation of putting the delay gratification of putting money in a retirement account every 2 weeks for decades, when I may not see myself as living that long anyway.
Yeah.
So why bother?
Yeah. And like, I have several friends that just like don't engage with school because why? Right. Like, performing well in high school, they see as so like unnecessary and so unimportant.
Yeah.
So they're just like fine with cruising by with a D. Yeah. As long as they get that diploma, then their life starts.
It's an ends to a means.
Yeah.
Right.
It means
or
to an
means
end.
to an end. Yeah.
When like, I think, and this is like sort of sham philosophy in my eyes, like life is a journey. Right. And if you don't savor the journey, instead just valuing the end point, once you get to the end point, it's not going to feel pleasurable.
Yeah, it's about
not
the
going to
process.
Be an enjoyable experience. Yeah.
And when you and I were talking about this podcast for months now, that was one of sort of the underlying themes we wanted to explore, is that as humans, our best days are still ahead. We are all works in progress. We have yet to even know our true final potential, because that might be light years away from us today. So that balance of, I need to be thinking a little future focused while also making sure I'm living a little bit of my life for the present day, is an important part of the human experience. Today's episode has been brought to you by the Inspired Ally Certificate Program. Modules designed to inspire confidence and competence in better partnering with LGBTQ plus communities. That these are concepts that whether in 1987 or 2024, this is the stuff that people are managing. Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of what we're getting, it's human experience. And human experience is, like we said with the little empathy spiel, it's universal.
Right.
And like, all of these things are consistent themes in the lives of everyday individuals. And recognizing these allows for a more holistic, I guess, experience of humanity and engagement with our own emotions.
When one is open
Yeah.
to going there. Like you and I know a lot of folks who, regardless of political ideology or that, those dynamics, there are folks who are either unable or unwilling in this very moment to engage in an empathy response with somebody who has a life that's different from them. And we could, as a clinical social worker, I can give a whole lot of reasons, some diagnostic, some not, of why that person might struggle with their ability to engage in empathy in that moment. Regardless of why, it's real. And so part of what you and I hope to achieve in these conversations and our future conversations is maybe like knocking on that door a little bit more to help make some of this more accessible to people, to have these conversations, to go actively seek out someone with an experience that is different than yours, however you define that, to learn, to evolve, and to grow as a human.
I totally agree. And what you were just saying just reminded me, it's not always other people that we need to get in touch with and empathize with. It's ourselves. Like a huge, huge, huge asset for me with my recovery was learning to engage with myself and empathize for myself again.
Yeah.
Because not only had I disconnected myself from the emotions of others or attempted to, I spent so much time attempting to disconnect myself from my own emotions and my own experiences. And I don't know if this is like unique to a more trauma-related mental illness, but like I needed to relearn to empathize for myself or with myself, because I vilified myself. I refused to engage with the past experiences, which were tearing me apart inside, because even like I just wouldn't let myself try to understand the emotions that I was having, try to like engage with the root cause of these things.
That's right.
And like, it's really important to try to understand other people, but something that can help us try to understand other people is getting a better understanding of ourselves.
Yeah. And making that time to do that. Like it doesn't come natural to most. And, in your own experience, what you've talked about is that it unfortunately took some tough times, some horrible stuff to bring you to where you're at today. I have to just ask the question, like, how do we inspire young people to go there with themselves in the absence of tough stuff having to happen?
That, I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that question well.
I'm not.
That's such a difficult and uniquely individual thing, right? Like for me, it took a shock to get me to even like try to start recovering. To try to start engaging with these things. And it was very sudden for me with disclosing the like immediate change that I felt with myself and those around me and the decisions that I was trying to engage with. But like it was a shock. Like I had attempted to end my own life multiple times in like violent ways on several occasions.
To avoid the process, the process of knowing oneself and exploring oneself, which is like the ultimate definition of a defense mechanism. Today's episode has been brought to you by the Inspired Allies Certificate Program. Modules designed to inspire confidence and competence in better partnering with LGBTQ+ communities. Fascinates.
Yeah, and it's so complex, and my like primary desire in my lifetime is to attempt to unravel the complexity that is human experience from a like standardized metric. Which obviously this is something that I have a tendency to do. I really want to turn things into black and white so that I can work with them logically. But like humanity is alias and just full of gray.
Yeah. Which is the part about it I love.
Yeah. And I try to like attempt to create black and white so that I can better understand it, which is a contrast between us. And I think aids in our discussions.
Yeah, it does. And what's fascinating to me about that statement is you are the most gray individual I know. Like you live, your life is defined. Who you are in every sense of the word is the middle, not this refusal of a binary system, right?
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating to me that your tendency or preference is to try to compartmentalize something into either this or that so you can analyze and study it, when that is the antithesis of who you are at your core.
Well, I think it's interesting you say that, because I think that the binaries that our current culture and society emphasizes aren't binaries. They're arbitrary boxes put over gray splotches.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So although I do strongly reject the like standardized model that our society uses to attempt to compartmentalize things and put them into black and white, I think that system is arbitrary, and I try to find my own black and white to put things into. I like, it's
your definition of the binary.
Yeah.
Today's episode has been brought to you by the Inspired Allies Certificate Program for educators looking to better partner with LGBTQ plus youth and their families.
Oof, I think we've
quite
we've met some of the goals of this podcast.
Yeah.
Of sharing some truth in our, from our perspectives, our experiences, hopefully inspiring some conversations, hopefully giving folks some permission to have some of these conversations as much with themselves as with other people. And let's call it a day.
Totally. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that this cultivates an audience, and feel free to reach out to me or Chris.
100%. And thank you, Soren, for your willingness to have this conversation, for being who you are, and for just sitting in this space with me.
Well, I wouldn't have a platform without you, so.
I'm happy. I'm happy to give you that platform. So thanks all. This has been Inspired Insights podcast with Chris McLaughlin.
And Soren Peterson.
And we'll see you next time.
Indeed. Bye.
The Inspired Insights podcast has been brought to you by Inspired Consulting Group, LLC.
Edited and produced by Amanda Seidel.
Music by Derek Herder. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.